Yeah, I just want to go over amendments 11 through 27 with you. All I need you to do is take notes on this. You guys have the note sheet. I put it on Google Classroom too. Just send me visual confirmation that you took the notes, and that's it. So we're going to go back over this when we come back in January. So don't think that you have to memorize all 27 amendments before the break. Obviously that'll be helpful, but don't put that stress on yourself. We're going to go back over it because obviously these are really important. And I definitely wanted to structure class this week in a way where if you're not going to be at school, you're not going to be screwed over, because you can just watch this at home and take care of it. It's not going to take very long. So let me share my screen and let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to minimize myself too so you can see the whole screen. So we're going to talk about the amendments after the Bill of Rights. There are 27 total amendments, and we have taken care of the first 10. I think that you guys have a pretty good grasp on those, hopefully. And we're just gonna knock out the rest of them, especially the 14th Amendment, which, as you're gonna see in a minute, is really large. The 14th Amendment is going to be a huge part of our class in January. And I just wanna front load that as much as I can. So when we do encounter that, we're ready to go. So let's talk about these. The 11th Amendment is the first one, after 10, obviously. And it is also the most irrelevant. So we're starting out, with whatever the opposite of a heavy hitter is, a lightweight, I guess. The 11th Amendment more than likely will not be on your AP test, but I do want to, teach it to you just because it'd be kind of weird if we just started with 12. So the 11th Amendment essentially says that federal court system cannot basically hear any lawsuits against the state if it's filed by someone that lives in a different state or a different country. And to make that make sense, think of it this way. A few of you guys have expressed your concern about the laws that have been passed in Texas regarding abortion. The only way for judicial review to work, as you guys know, is by a lawsuit, right? And eventually, it'll get all the way up to the Supreme Court. Although, all the courts technically have the power of judicial review. The Supreme Court just kind of has the final say. If you don't like it, you can't sue Texas to try and get that ball rolling. If you don't like a law in another state, you can't do anything about it. So if you sue, they're not going to hear you out, essentially, in the federal court system. That's all the 11th Amendment is. And think about it this way: you can't 1v1 another state. 11 is two ones, right? So just like a way to remember that. Obviously, also if you have any questions at all, just shoot me a text or respond on Google Classroom. However you want to do it, just let me know, because the worst part about teaching stuff virtually is, you guys can't ask questions as easily. So please don't be intimidated by that. All right, 12th Amendment. Now we're getting into the good stuff. So the way that we design our Constitution when it comes to the selection of vice president is really bad. The system that we put in place was whoever finishes second in the race for president, they just become the vice president. And that was a terrible idea. The reason that we designed it was we didn't anticipate political parties basically being as strong as they are. Yes, we had Federalists and Anti-Federalists. And I know you guys know that, and I know you're thinking, well, that doesn't make a ton of sense because we knew political parties were coming. We had political parties when this was built, yes. But the idea that was generally accepted was once the Constitution, kind of went through, because that was the whole beef between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists to begin with. Once the Constitution went through, you were going to see these political parties just kind of dissolve, and that didn't happen. So around 1800, everyone was like, okay, this is a problem because the vice president and the president, one, don't get along politically, so they're not going to agree on things. And two, it encourages assassination because all you need to do for your opposing political party, to become the, party that holds the presidency is just to kill the president, which, that's not a great system. So we were just like, okay, we're going to scrap that bad idea, take the L, and move on. I think that among other things, this is probably a top tier example of why the Constitution is just so much better than the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation had a lot of structural problems, right? But we couldn't fix them because the threshold for an amendment was just way too high. The threshold for an amendment under the Constitution is also pretty high, but it's not like impossible, right? It's not 100% vote. It's 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of states. So the 12th Amendment is a great example of us fixing our flaws. We passed an amendment realizing that the Constitution had a structural flaw and changed the way that the presidential election system worked so that separate votes are now cast for president and vice president. And if you need, again, a little corny trick to remember which amendment is which, one election, two ballots, right? 1, 2, 12, one election, two ballots. You're casting a ballot separately for president and vice president. Well, I guess you're not. The Electoral College is casting a ballot separately for president and vice president. Okay, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are known as the Reconstruction Amendments, right? Because they are done during the period of Reconstruction, which hopefully you learned about during US history. I know last year was weird, but essentially Reconstruction is this time in history in between the Jim Crow era and the Civil War where life didn't suck for Black people. It's a really small period of time, but they're rebuilding the South and everyone's like, dang, we should probably, treat Black people not as slaves anymore. So the Reconstruction Amendments come in 13, 14, and 15 to kind of remedy that situation. The 13th Amendment is going to abolish slavery. And I know, especially in Pine Bluff, since we celebrate Juneteenth, that the Emancipation Proclamation gets a lot of credit for freeing the slaves. It's not that the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't important, but the 13th Amendment is what freed the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves in the Confederate States, which were not part of the United States at the time. So we essentially freed the slaves in another country, which is kind of weird. So the 13th Amendment is going to abolish slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation, it's not like it didn't help, it certainly made the idea more popular, but the 13th Amendment is what I need you to understand freed the slaves. The 14th Amendment, like I was saying at the beginning of this, is the most complicated, the most important of all of the amendments, even including the first 10 in this class. It might not be the most important to you personally, right? But when it comes to the stuff in this class, the 14th Amendment has the largest, bear of burden when it comes to the percentage of amendments you're going to see on the AP test. So the first part of 5 in the 14th Amendment deals again with slavery. It says anyone that is born or naturalized in the United States is a United States citizen. That's important for a couple reasons. One, slaves at this time were born in the United States. I know when we think of slavery, we tend to think like, oh, they were taken off of a boat from Africa. But remember, the Compromise on Importation ended up leading to the ban of the importation of slaves in 1808. So all of the slaves, unless they were like super duper old at this time, all of the slaves were born in the United States. So this now gives those people citizenship because they are born in the United States. They are a United States citizen. So we've got the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. We've got the 14th Amendment, which gave those people citizenship. So we're still making progress here. So this again solves the problem of African Americans not being United States citizens. It also again kind of codifies this born or naturalized method of citizenship saying, again, you can become naturalized. If you remember the qualifications to become president, one of those is that you are either born or naturalized in the United States. Ted Cruz, for example, he ran for president, I think 2 times now. He was born in Canada. His dad was born in Cuba, but his mom's born in America. He grows up in America, and that is considered being naturalized. Now, there's not exactly a very strict definition of this, but it does kind of give I don't even want to call it a loophole, but it does give a little bit of leeway to people that were not born in the United States, but know nothing other than the United States, to basically easily gain citizenship. Okay, second part. People of all races are now 5/5 of a person when it comes to apportioning representatives. If you guys remember right, we have the 3/5 clause, right, which considered, I don't want to say black people, I guess they weren't considered people, which considered slaves 3/5 of a person when it came to, the representatives in the House of Representatives and the number that each state got. That really helped the southern states because they have a bunch of slaves, right? And now they get more people in the House of Representatives to make sure that slavery continues. Now they're going to get an extra 2/5. So this is going to help southern states, but it's also, first and foremost going to help black people because it is now codified in the Constitution that if you are black, you are a person, you are a whole person. Not just part of a person, not just property. Well, I guess the word just there is not good. You're not part of a person, you're not property, you are a whole person. Third piece is a piece of retribution against the people who fought against the Union during the Civil War. So this is saying that if you rebelled against the United States, so if you fought in the Confederate Army, if you served in the Confederate government, you cannot hold public office in the United States. So again, to recap, 13th Amendment is going to abolish slavery. 14th Amendment is going to give slaves citizenship. It's going to count them as a whole person. And the people who tried to basically continue the institution of slavery or exacerbate the institution of slavery, those people get punished by this. All right, now this slide we're going to see a million times in the coming month up here in January. So the 14th Amendment has 3 clauses in it. So the fourth part, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to rearrange the stuff at the top so you guys can see everything. The fourth part of the 13th Amendment is huge, and that is the 3 clauses. So there are 3 clauses here. You've got the Due Process Clause, the Equal Protection Clause, and the Privileges and Immunities Clause. And you can see right at the bottom which typography each one is. The first piece up top, no state shall make or enforce any law which abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. That is just the normal type there. That is called the Privileges and Immunities Clause. And the biggest practical impact of that is it stops states from being prejudiced against immigrants. So this is going to deal with slavery, right? Because you have just massive amounts of former slaves, now 5/5 of a person, right? Black people, moving all throughout the country. And there are states that are going to start to pass laws which limit the, benefits that newcomers to their state get. And that's still the case today. I mean, you have immigrants, especially coming from South and Central America, that are, there are laws that are in place, especially in the southeastern part of the country in California, where those people don't get the same fully fledged, rights and benefits of everybody else. And those things are routinely challenged with the Privileges and Immunities Clause. The Declaration of Independence clearly states that people are born with inalienable rights. And those are the privileges afforded to them by being in the United States of America. You are immune to, things that those states are essentially doing to those immigrants. So this is relevant today. It is relevant in the context of Reconstruction. The Privileges and Immunities Clause is the least used of these three in this class, but it is important that you understand that if you move to another state, or if you're traveling throughout the country, you are entitled to the benefits that that state offers. And that's what the Privileges and Immunities Clause does. The second piece, the Due Process Clause, is the most important clause of the three when it comes to the judicial system. There's going to be, I think, don't misquote me on this, I want to say 6 of our 15 Supreme Court cases all have to deal with the Due Process Clause. So it says that nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. And we learned about due process in the Fifth Amendment, right? The Fifth Amendment explained that due process is this legal process that you have to go through in order for things to essentially be done correctly, right? And if a state is not providing the protections to its citizens that it needs to, right, legally, you can sue under the Due Process Clause. So to kind of spoil an upcoming court case that we're going to study in January, there's a court case, Gideon versus Wainwright, which deals with the Sixth Amendment, which is a right to fair and speedy trial, right? And one aspect of fair is that if you cannot afford representation, you're going to have a public defender that is appointed for you, right? And in the Gideon versus Wainwright case, you have Gideon, who is like basically a homeless person who is like very, very broke, and he is accused, potentially falsely, I don't know actually if that ever got cleared up, but anyway, he's accused of robbery. He is not allowed counsel in the state that he lives in, despite the fact that that's a Sixth Amendment right awarded to you in federal cases, because according to, I believe it was the state of Florida, you could only have representation afforded to you or appointed to you by the state if it was a death penalty case. And a robbery case is not a death penalty case, right? So Gideon, who is incredibly uneducated and again, broke and homeless, he has to defend himself. He has to represent himself, and he does terribly. But when he is in jail, he kind of studies the law. He learns that you're at the federal level, you are allowed, or I guess not even allowed, you are awarded the right to representation being appointed to you if you can't afford one, representation, right? So he sues again for wrongful imprisonment, citing the Due Process Clause. He says, hey, the state of Florida didn't follow due process. I was, essentially entitled to this part of the law. It was only applied at the federal level at the time. And the Supreme Court agreed. They said, yeah, that was messed up. So they applied the Sixth Amendment right to counsel to due process. They said that's part of due process. And now all states have to follow it. So they essentially forced that part of the Constitution onto the states. Now all states have to follow that. That process, for the record, is called selective incorporation, but we'll get to that at a later time. I just want you to understand the Due Process Clause. So this is a method, essentially, to boil it down into like one nice, easy, understandable piece here. The Due Process Clause is used to force states to abide by the Constitution. The Constitution, right, is at the federal level, and the Due Process Clause is used to apply that Constitution to the states as well. Okay, if that was confusing, please don't worry. We're going to cover, like I said, a million court cases that all deal with that. Last piece here is the Equal Protection Clause, and this is the most commonly cited piece of the Constitution in federal lawsuits today. It says, no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So this again goes back to Reconstruction, right? If there are states that are passing laws that treat people differently based on race, that law is going to be deemed unconstitutional because of the Equal Protection Clause. So this is put in place. All three of these really are put in place to give Black people an avenue to sue if a state is doing them dirty. So when it comes to things like Brown versus Board, they're going to use the Equal Protection Clause and say, hey, these schools are not equal. If you guys have ever heard the term separate but equal, that was the legal rationale for Jim Crow, because the emphasis here is put on the term equal. Well, yeah, the facilities are separate, but as long as they have the same quality, then it's legal, right? So this clause is essentially the reason that segregation ended, but it's the reason that segregation started as well. This was the rationale for separate but equal, but it was also the same clause that tore down separate but equal later on when the Supreme Court realized things are not actually equal. This is also the clause that's gonna, for example, legalize gay marriage, right? Because you've got, homosexual couples that aren't given the same right as heterosexual couples. That's not those people being equally protected, right? So the Equal Protection Clause is used by marginalized groups to gain fair treatment. And that was especially important during Reconstruction when you had Black people being treated unfairly by especially Southern states. Okay, that was a lot. I know it's a lot. We are going to continue to go over this slide many, many, many times. But if you feel like you have even a decent grasp on one of these clauses, hey, that's a win. This is part 6. I'm so sorry, I forgot to fix that. In your notes, it's part 5. My bad. So all debts owed in the Confederate States of America are no longer a thing. And slave owners cannot get compensation for their lost property when that property all of a sudden became 5/5 of a person. So this is again a punishment thing where, let's say, you bought a bunch of slaves, some guy sold you a bunch of slaves, right? You owe money to that person, now you don't. This also deals with jurisdiction, right? We don't have power over the Confederate States of America. So those were separate countries, right? Our country and their country, separate countries. So if there was any kind of debt that was owed, we can't legally recognize that as the United States of America because it wasn't a debt that got accrued in our country, right? If you owe money in Spain or whatever and you move to the United States, it's not our job to make sure that you pay that, it's theirs. The difference here is that the Confederate States no longer exist. So whose job is it to enforce that debt? Nobody's, right? There's no country that legally exists that can force you to pay that debt. So that debt's just erased. Now, in the same token, that means if you just lost a bunch of money, right, in the form of slaves, say you had $1 million worth of slaves and now they're all free, you don't get $1 million back. This is not like, homeowners insurance, So if people were mad about that, too bad. 14th Amendment, screw you guys. You own slaves, you're a bad person. And then lastly, this isn't like a part or anything that you have to write down, but I do want to basically put this to your attention. Congress does have the power to enact legislation that's going to force the states to abide by these things. So you already can anticipate, right, the Southern states being pissed about the 14th Amendment and the 13th and 15th Amendments, but especially the 14th Amendment. And if anyone tries to do anything funny, maybe they sue and they say, well, the slaves weren't my property. They were my workers and I want workers' compensation. No, can't do that either. Congress can just pass a law clarifying that that's not a thing. Okay, moving on, 15th Amendment. So we've got, again, 13th, freeing the slaves, 14th, giving them citizenship, 15th, giving them the right to vote. So this gives all citizens, as long as they're male and not Native American, the right to vote. So you cannot be denied the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude, meaning you were a slave in the past. You get to vote, period. Now, if you're a female or if you're Native American, you're still screwed. But this is still somewhat of a win, right? Because now Black men can vote. 16th Amendment, income tax. So this is an interesting piece here. We separated from Great Britain, right? And part of the reason was that the federal level of government, right, which was run by the king, was taxing the crap out of everybody. And we are now going to pass an amendment that allows Congress, if they really wanted to tax the crap out of everybody. So an income tax, right, is a tax on the amount of money that you make from your job. You can actually remember this, right? Because when you are 16, you kind of get your first job. And when you get your first job, you start to have income, you have to start paying income tax. So income tax is a tax, again, levied by the federal government, where a portion of what you make at your job gets sent to them so they can provide services for you and everybody else. So we didn't have an income tax before the 16th Amendment, now we do. And I don't believe that the founders would be particularly happy about the fact that we have an income tax now, but they're all dead. So, hey, it is what it is. And again, when you're 16, you start making income, 16th Amendment income tax. Okay, 17th Amendment, real simple. You can vote for Senate now. Prior to this, you could only vote for the House of Representatives, right? 17th Amendment lets you vote for senators. Again, if you need a corny way to remember that, 17 senators, right? They kind of sound similar, at least more so than any other number would to the word senators. So 17 senators. And then we'll get to elite theory of democracy later, so don't worry about that. That'll make sense to you in like a month or two. 18th Amendment is called prohibition. And this is a direct result of the temperance movement. So the 18th Amendment made the production, sale, and transport and consumption of alcohol illegal. Let me explain that. So hopefully you remember a little bit about the Industrial Revolution when you learned about that, either in my class, in US history, or both. The Industrial Revolution is a time where working conditions are terrible. People are working long hours for little pay, and it's just a mess. So you have these men, especially, who are going to work. They're working 16 hours a day for like $1 an hour. And they're exhausted, they're depressed, they're tired, and they want to go to the bar after work so they can get drunk and kind of drown their sorrows. They come home and their family's upset because they just spent half the money that they earned at work on alcohol. There's all kinds of problems. There's abuse in the household. Alcohol is a real plague on society. And women especially are going to begin to protest. It's called the temperance movement. They're going to begin to protest all across the country saying we need to ban alcohol because it's ruining our society. Suicide rates were up, rates of depression were really, really high, rates of abuse in the household were really, really high, and they're attributing all of that to alcohol. And as you know, America is a very religious country, basically all of the Christian religions kind of got together and they were like, yeah, we support the temperance movement. Islam already, doesn't like alcohol to begin with, so they're going to be on board. So you basically have this powerhouse of religion plus women advocating for this 18th Amendment, the prohibition of production, sale, transport, and consumption of alcohol. What women realize during this time is that they have a voice and they can use that voice. If you think about it, they just passed an amendment without having the ability to vote, solely by speaking up about what they believed in. So they said, we should do? We should keep doing this, but we should shoot for the right to vote. And they do. So would they go from, this kind of, also for the record, this is just an absolutely legendary squad pick. Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. They go from this very successful protest, which culminates in the passing of the 18th Amendment, to continuing on to the 19th Amendment. And the 19th Amendment is going to give women the right to vote. You can remember the 18th Amendment, right? Because when you're 18, you're an adult, but you still can't drink. The 19th Amendment is going to be the women getting the right to vote. And those two, I want in your mind to kind of go hand in hand, right? Women are the ones who wanted the prohibition of alcohol, and then they get the right to vote right afterwards. So there's not like necessarily a corny way for you to remember the 19th Amendment, but if you tie it in your mind to the 18th Amendment, I think it'll make sense. So again, 19th Amendment gives women the right to vote. That's really awesome. 20th Amendment is kind of, let me phrase it this way. The 20th Amendment is important, but it's not a particularly sexy amendment, right? It's not anything that has a a huge impact on our society or anything like that, but it is important. So it all deals with the term lame duck. So a lame duck refers to a president who will not be the president again after the election that just happened. So elections are the first week of November, always. And oftentimes the president has determined, you know, by that election, it will change, the presidency will change. Either the president is term limited or they have been voted out of office. The period in which a president who is leaving the White House, but is still there until the end of their term, that's called the lame duck session, meaning they don't have any power. Nobody really wants them there. No one cares what they say. They're just kind of taking up space. That's why they call the lame duck. And that session used to be really, really long. It would be from November all the way to March. So you would have this time, right? November, December, January, February, March, 5 months, where you'd have a president that no one really cares about that much being in charge. So the 20th Amendment is going to move the time up that the new president takes office. So instead of them coming in March, they're going to come in January, and they're going to start on January 20. So 20th Amendment, January 20. That's a nice, easy way to remember that. Also, for the record, it does say in there that Congress must meet at least once a year. And I don't know if that was actually a problem or not, but I do think that's hilarious that they had to actually write that down. Okay, 21st Amendment is just going to get rid of the 18th Amendment. So once women got the right to vote, men were like, okay, I'm taking my alcohol back. So it's going to get rid of the 18th Amendment, and now you can drink again. It does say 21st. I'm really sorry about that. That should definitely say 21st. My bad. But you do have to be 21 to drink. So you can remember the 18th Amendment prohibits alcohol. You're 18, right? You're an adult, but you can't drink. 21st Amendment is the drinking age, and it's also now you can drink. So hopefully those two will be really easy for you to remember. The 22nd Amendment just codifies term limits. So you can't be president more than twice. That's it. So you can remember that 22, right? 2 terms. 22nd Amendment, you can be president twice. That's it. So 2 4-year terms, that's it. Okay, 23rd Amendment, almost done. The corny phrase for this is 2-3 DC. So you have 2 terms, 2-3 DC. This just gives Washington, DC residents the right to vote. Now, if you're thinking to yourself right now, they couldn't, ? Yeah, I know, it's weird, right? So Washington, DC is not actually in a state. The founders did not want our federal government to be in any particular state because they thought if that's the case, then the laws that are passed at the federal level will be designed to benefit one state over others. So the 23rd Amendment is going to come in and say, even though you are, you guys, Washington, DC, even though you are not in a particular state, you can still vote for president. So DC residents are not represented in Congress. They don't have any senators or anything like that, but they do have one non-voting delegate in the House. They get to share their opinion, but they don't get to vote. And that's like the same treatment that some of our island territories also have, like Puerto Rico and so on. So again, 2-3 DC can vote now. 24th Amendment, poll taxes are illegal. So poll taxes are a tax that you have to pay in order to vote. That's no longer a thing, right? But it was, and that was really bad because if you were a not economically advantaged person, right? I guess if you were a poor person, you couldn't afford to vote, which is kind of crazy that we had a system like that. So the 24th Amendment is going to ban poll taxes. 25th Amendment just sets the succession in case the president and vice president go down in whatever manner. There was like a widely accepted order of who would become president, but it didn't extend very far at the time. So the 25th Amendment just really writes it down. here is what's going to happen. So here's the order. You only have to know the bold and underlined piece. So you have to know president first, then vice president, speaker of the House, president pro temp, in that order. And then after that, it's the secretaries in the order of what department was created first. And if you are one of those people who's thinking to yourself, what if literally all of these people die at the same time? Which is a really morbid thought. But what if all 19 of these people that are written down here, they all die? I can't answer that. So here's what would happen. So the president pro temp, right, is the longest serving member of the United States Senate. The Speaker of the House has to be elected, right? But the president pro temp is just like automatically the person that has been in the Senate for the longest amount of time. So whenever there's a vacancy due to a death, the governor of each state appoints a new senator to fill that spot until the next election. So what would happen if all these people die, including, you know, all the members of the House, all the members of the Senate, everybody's dead. What would happen is whichever governor appoints someone to the Senate first, that person would now be the longest serving senator and they would become president. So anyway, really weird. Okay, 2 more amendments. We're almost done. Ms. McLeod is giving an announcement. Hold on. Okay, she's done. 26th Amendment is going to lower the voting age to 18. So it used to be 21. It is now 18, which is good for you guys. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to propose to you. The 26th Amendment lowers the voting age to 18. And you can remember that because 2 + 6 is 8. 2 + 6 is 8. And we know that the 8th Amendment is freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. So it's not the 8th Amendment. I don't know. That's a really bad way to remember it. We'll think of something. I'm sorry. We'll think of something. But 26th Amendment lowers the voting age to 18. 27th Amendment, which is the final one, Congress cannot give themselves a pay raise. And if they do, it doesn't take effect until the next election cycle. Oh my God. These people with their announcements. I'm so sorry. Can't stand the school sometimes. Okay. 27th Amendment. I'm going to say that again. Congress cannot give themselves a pay raise. If they do, it doesn't take effect until the next election cycle. So those people could potentially not benefit from the pay raise. And you can think about it this way, right? It's the last amendment. And the last thing that we want is for politicians to get even more money. So that is amendments 11 through 27. Just do me a favor and summarize all these on your notes. And we're going to go back over this when we come back from Christmas break. I appreciate you guys. Let me know if you have any questions.